Katie Devane was 30 seconds away from driving out of that dealership in a brand new Porsche 911 Turbo S. Her manicured hand was already reaching for the door handle. The salesman in his perfectly pressed suit was smiling that commission smile. And then I looked at my ex-husband's face, at Terry, and I knew something was very, very wrong. Not wrong for him, wrong for her, wrong for both of them. But that satisfied look on his face, the one that said he'd won everything and I'd lost it all, it was about to be wiped clean. He just didn't know it yet. None of us knew what was coming. Not the FBI investigation, not the viral video that would be seen by 14 million people, not the 14 years in federal prison. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That satisfied look I mentioned, it lasted exactly 47 seconds, the time between the first card swipe and the third decline. 47 seconds of watching a man who thought he owned the world realize he couldn't even buy a car. The Porsche dealership in Oak Brook sits like a glass temple on the edge of Chicago's wealthiest suburbs. That Tuesday afternoon, the showroom was hushed and reverent. Soft lighting bounced off chrome and leather. The air smelled like money and new car and impossible dreams. Terry walked in like he owned the place. He always walked like that, into restaurants, into boardrooms, into our marriage. Katie was draped on his arm, wearing a white dress so tight it looked painted on. Her heels clicked against the polished concrete floor like a metronome, counting down to disaster. The salesman rushed over. His name tag said Bradley. His smile said 6% commission on a $230,000 sale. Terry didn't even look at him. He pointed at the white 911 Turbo S sitting in the center of the showroom like a sculpture in a museum. That one. My wife likes white. Wife. The word hit me like a slap. The ink on the divorce papers had been signed that morning. The ink was barely dry on my signature, and already he was calling her his wife. Katie giggled. "Oh, Richie, you're too much." Richie. She called him Richie. In 7 years of marriage, I never once called him that. Maybe that was part of the problem. Maybe I never learned to make him feel like the center of the universe. Or maybe I just wasn't willing to pretend. Bradley, the salesman, was practically vibrating with excitement. "Excellent choice, sir. The Turbo S is our flagship model. Shall I prepare the paperwork?" Terry pulled out his wallet. Black leather, Gucci. I'd bought it for him 3 Christmases ago. He extracted a credit card and tossed it onto the counter like it was a business card. "Run it. We're paying in full today." $230,000. Just like that. Katie was already taking selfies next to the car. She angled her phone to catch the Porsche logo, then her face, then her cleavage. Content for Instagram. Evidence of her new life. Proof that she'd won the prize. I was standing near a silver Cayenne, pretending to read a brochure about horsepower and torque. I'd been there for 20 minutes before they arrived. I knew they'd come. Katie had been posting about her surprise all week. "A gift for my man. Can't wait to see what it is." The hashtags were nauseating. Blessed life. Upgrade complete. New chapter, new me. Bradley swiped the card. The machine beeped. He frowned, typed something, swiped again. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "This card has been declined." Terry left. "That's impossible. Try it again." Bradley tried again. Same result. Terry's smile flickered. Just for a second. He pulled out another card. Platinum this time. "Use this one." Declined. The showroom had gone quiet. Other customers were starting to look. A woman in pearls whispered something to her husband. A young man in a Tesla jacket smirked. Terry's face was turning red. He reached into his wallet one more time and pulled out the black American Express, the invitation-only card, the one with no preset spending limit, the one that was supposed to be impossible to decline. He swiped it himself this time. His hand was shaking, just slightly, just enough for me to notice. The machine beeped. "Sir," Bradley said, and his voice had changed now, less eager, more cautious. "This card is also showing as declined. Perhaps there's been some mistake with your bank." Katie had stopped taking selfies. She was staring at Terry with wide eyes. "Richie, what's going on?" Terry didn't answer her. He was staring at the card machine like it had personally betrayed him, like the numbers on the screen were lying. I slipped my phone out of my purse and typed a quick message. Phase 1 complete. The response came instantly. Received. Proceed to phase 2. I tucked my phone away and walked toward the exit. I didn't look at Terry. I didn't need to. I could feel his eyes on my back as I pushed through the glass doors into the afternoon sun. But here's what I didn't know yet. That satisfied look would come back. 18 months later, in a place I never expected, Terry would be smiling again, convinced he had finally destroyed me, convinced he had won. And that time, the fall would be so much harder. Let me start from the beginning, from the morning I signed my divorce papers and became a free woman. At least, that's what I thought. The Cook County Courthouse smelled like floor wax and desperation. I sat in a gray plastic chair with my back straight and my hands folded in my lap. Across the table, Terry was checking his watch. His lawyer was checking his phone. Everyone was ready to move on. 7 years. That's how long I'd been Mrs. Terry Johnson. 7 years of dinner parties and business trips and smiling for photographs. 7 years of building something I thought was ours. 7 years of being wrong. The mediator slid the final document across the table. Mrs. Johnson, if you'll sign here, we can finalize the agreement. I picked up the pen. Blue ink. Cheap ballpoint. The kind of pen you use to sign away a life. Terry leaned back in his chair. That satisfied look was already spreading across his face. You know, Eleanor, he said, using my maiden name like it was an insult, this is the best thing for both of us. You're not equipped for the life I'm building. You never were. I didn't respond. I just signed my name, Brenda Gibson. Clean, clear. Not a single stroke out of place. Terry's lawyer gathered the papers. My lawyer, a quiet woman named Patricia Okonkwo, gave me a small nod. It was done. Terry stood up, buttoning his jacket. He was wearing the navy suit I'd picked out for him 2 years ago, the one that made him look like a senator. I used to love that suit. I hope there's no hard feelings, he said. His voice was almost gentle, almost convincing. You'll land on your feet, women like you always do. Women like me. I wondered what that meant. Women who cooked his meals and ironed his shirts and looked the other way when he came home, smelling like someone else's perfume. Women who pretended not to notice the charges on the credit card for hotels we never visited together. He walked toward the door where Katie was waiting. She was wearing sunglasses indoors like a celebrity hiding from paparazzi. When she saw me looking, she smiled. A thin smile, a victorious smile. Come on, baby, she said, loud enough for me to hear. Let's go get my car. They left. The door swung shut behind them, and for a long moment, I just sat there in the silence. Patricia touched my arm. Are you all right? I'm fine, I said, and I meant it. Because here's what Terry didn't know. Here's what none of them knew. For the past 11 years, long before I ever met Terry Johnson, I'd been working as a financial analyst. Not just any analyst. I was the CFO of a logistics startup called RapidRoute. We weren't famous. We weren't flashy. We were just very, very good at what we did. 3 years ago, Amazon acquired us for $47 million. My share in stock options and retention bonuses came to $3.2 million. After taxes, I had $2.1 million sitting in an account in Delaware, an account Terry didn't know existed, an account I'd kept separate because something in my gut told me I might need it someday. That something turned out to be right. But the money wasn't even the best part. The best part was the house in Naperville, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a garden that I'd planted myself with roses and hydrangeas and a Japanese maple that turned crimson every fall. Terry loved that house. He loved telling people about that house. He loved pretending he'd bought it. But the house wasn't his. It never had been. My grandmother left it to me when she died 2 years before I even met Terry. It was in my name and only my name, protected by a trust that my grandmother's lawyer had insisted on. Back then, I thought it was unnecessary, paranoid even. Now I understood it was the greatest gift she ever gave me. Terry thought I was leaving this marriage with nothing. He thought I'd be crawling back to my mother's house in Indiana, broke and broken. He thought he'd won. He was so wrong. I walked out of the courthouse into the March wind. Chicago was cold and bright and full of possibility. I hailed a cab. Where to? The driver asked. Oak Brook, I said. The Porsche dealership. He raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. 20 minutes later, I was standing inside that glass temple, watching my ex-husband's world begin to crumble. The credit card cancellations weren't personal, they were legal. During the marriage, Terry had opened those cards using funds from our joint accounts that I had every right to freeze once I discovered clear evidence of asset dissipation, the legal term for spending marital money on your mistress. I'd spent 11 months documenting everything, every transfer, every suspicious expense, every lie. I had spreadsheets, I had screenshots, I had receipts. Brenda's receipts. The frozen accounts were just the beginning, a warning shot across the bow, a way of letting Terry know that the woman he'd underestimated for 7 years was finally awake. As I watched him fumble with his declined cards, watched Katie's perfect makeup crease with confusion, watched the other customers whisper and stare, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, not revenge, just a quiet, steady certainty. This was only the first act. The real show was still 18 months away. The days after the dealership incident were chaos. Terry called me 17 times in the first 48 hours. I answered exactly once. "What the hell did you do?" His voice was raw, stripped of its usual polish. "Those accounts were mine, Brenda, mine." "They were ours," I said calmly, "and you were using them to fund a lifestyle that had nothing to do with our marriage." He sputtered something about lawyers and lawsuits and making me pay. I let him finish. "You should talk to your accountant, Terry. Ask him about the $1.4 million that went to Devane Consulting LLC over the past 3 years. Then ask yourself if you really want to go to war with me." I hung up. He didn't call again for 2 weeks. During that time, I learned the full extent of what Terry had been doing, not just the affair with Katie. That was almost quaint by comparison. No, what my forensic accountant discovered was something much worse. Her name was Deborah Nance. She had gray hair, reading glasses, and the personality of a very patient bloodhound. Patricia had recommended her. "She's expensive," Patricia warned, "but she finds everything." Everything turned out to be an understatement. Deborah spent 6 weeks going through the financial records of Johnson Development Group, Terry's company, the company he'd built with my support, my encouragement, my blind faith, the company that was supposed to be our legacy. What she found made my stomach turn. The Shell Corporation came first, Devane Consulting LLC, registered in Nevada under the name of Katie's mother. On paper, it was a consulting firm providing strategic services to Johnson Development. In reality, it was a funnel. Money went in from legitimate projects, money came out to pay for Katie's apartment in Miami, Katie's jewelry, Katie's trips to Turks and Caicos while Terry was supposedly at conferences in Dallas. Total diverted, $1.4 million over 3 years. But that wasn't even the worst part. Terry was also inflating project costs, padding invoices, skimming from the top. Every time Johnson Development built a new condo complex or renovated a commercial property, Terry was adding phantom expenses and pocketing the difference. A few thousand here, 10,000 there, it added up. Total fraud, approximately $4.7 million. The man I'd married, the man I'd believed in, was a thief. He'd been stealing from his own company, his own investors, his own partners, and he'd been using the proceeds to fund a secret life that had nothing to do with me. When Deborah showed me the final report, all 347 pages of it, I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just sat in her office and stared at the numbers until they stopped looking like betrayal and started looking like ammunition. 3 weeks later, I went to the charity gala. It was the annual fundraiser for the Johnson Development Foundation, Terry's pet project, a way of laundering his reputation while his accountants laundered his money. Every year, Chicago's elite gathered in a ballroom at the Drake Hotel to write checks and pat each other on the back. Every year, I stood by Terry's side and smiled until my face ached. This year was different. I wasn't supposed to be there. The divorce was final. Katie was his official date now, but my name was still on the original invitation list, and no one had thought to remove it. I wore a black dress, simple, elegant, the kind of dress that doesn't demand attention but commands it anyway. I walked into that ballroom alone, and for a moment, the entire room went quiet. Terry saw me first. He was standing near the bar with Katie on his arm. When our eyes met, his face went through a rapid sequence of emotions: surprise, anger,
fear, then finally contempt. He walked over, leaving Katie behind. "What are you doing here, Brenda? This is my event." I looked around at the glittering crowd. "Actually, Terry, I believe the foundation is a registered nonprofit, which makes it everyone's event." Before he could respond, a man appeared at his elbow. Glenn Harrington, old money, one of Terry's biggest investors. He had the kind of face that looked permanently disappointed. "Terry," Glenn said. His voice was pleasant, but his eyes were cold. "Could I have a word? In private?" Terry glanced at me, then at Glenn. "Now?"
"Now," Glenn confirmed. "My wife had an interesting lunch last week with Mrs. Gibson here. She showed me some documents I'd very much like to discuss." I watched the color drain from Terry's face. It was beautiful. Glenn took Terry by the arm and steered him toward a private room. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was in those documents. I'd given them to Margaret Harrington myself. I watched Terry disappear into the private room with Glenn. The door closed behind them. Through the frosted glass, I could see shapes moving, hands gesturing. Whatever Glenn was saying, Terry didn't like it. I circulated through the party. Old acquaintances approached me with careful smiles. Some expressed sympathy about the divorce. Others asked pointed questions about what had happened. I answered everything with vague pleasantries. "The weather's lovely. Yes, I'm doing well. No, I'm not sure what's next for me. Just taking things one day at a time." All the while, I was watching Katie. She'd been left alone at the bar. Without Terry beside her, she seemed smaller somehow, less certain. The other women at the gala kept their distance. Wives who had known me for years looked at Katie like she was something unpleasant that had wandered in from the street. Margaret Harrington was the worst. Glenn's wife. Old money, old manners. She walked past Katie without a glance, as if the younger woman simply didn't exist. Terry emerged from the private room 45 minutes later. His face was gray. His tie was loosened. The swagger that had carried him through the front door was gone. He found Katie at the bar and grabbed her arm. "We're leaving." "But we just got here. I wanted to dance." "Now, Katie, we're leaving now." I watched them go. Terry's shoulders were hunched. His steps were quick, almost frantic. Whatever Glenn had told him in that room, it had shaken him badly. Good. Katie came back 20 minutes later. She must have broken free from Terry's grip long enough to confront me one more time. She was vibrating with barely contained rage. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she hissed, "but Terry is going to destroy you. He has lawyers, he has connections. You're nothing. You're a nobody who got lucky enough to marry up, and now you're bitter because he found someone better." I looked at her, really looked at her. She was young, 27, maybe 28, beautiful in the way that required constant maintenance, Botox and fillers and weekly salon appointments, and absolutely convinced that she'd won. "You should ask Terry about Devane Consulting," I said. Her face flickered. "What?" "Ask him where the money came from. Ask him whose name is on the paperwork. Ask him what happens when the IRS starts asking questions. Ask him why your mother's name is on corporate documents she's never seen." Her eyes widened. "How do you know about my mother?" "I know everything, Katie. I've known for months. The question you should be asking yourself is why Terry didn't tell you that I knew." I walked away, leaving her standing there with her champagne glass in her confusion. Behind me, I could hear the party continuing, music and laughter and the clink of crystal. But underneath it all, something had shifted. Cracks were forming in the foundation of Terry's perfect life. I found out later what Glenn had told him in that private room. The investors were conducting an independent audit. The irregularities that Deborah Nance had found, the same irregularities I'd shared with Margaret Harrington over lunch, were about to become official findings. If Terry couldn't explain where $4.7 million had gone, the investors would be going to the authorities. Glenn gave him 2 weeks to come up with an explanation. Terry didn't have one. He never would. The discovery of Katie wasn't dramatic. There was no lipstick on a collar, no perfume on a shirt. It was a credit card statement, $12,400 at a jeweler in downtown Chicago, dated 2 weeks before my birthday.
I remember staring at that line item for a long time, trying to convince myself there was an explanation. Maybe it was a gift for his mother. Maybe it was an investment piece he was planning to surprise me with later. Maybe. But the thing about lies is that they have a texture. Once you learn to feel it, you can't unfeel it. I didn't receive any jewelry that birthday. I received a card, generic and unsigned until the morning of, and a dinner reservation at a restaurant Terry picked because he liked the wine list. He spent most of the evening on his phone, texting someone who made him smile in a way I hadn't seen in years. That night, lying next to him in the dark, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't going to cry or scream or beg for explanations. I was going to find out the truth, and then I was going to decide what to do with it. I started paying attention after that, not confronting, not accusing, just watching, documenting, building a file. It's amazing what you can learn when you stop hoping and start looking. The hotel receipts were easy to find. He used the same card for everything. The Peninsula, the Langham, the Four Seasons. Always midweek, always when he said he was working late. The text messages took longer. I'm not proud of how I got them, but when you suspect your husband of infidelity, you do things you never thought you were capable of. Katie wasn't the first. She was the fourth. Over 7 years, there had been 3 others, a paralegal at his law firm, a marketing consultant he met at a conference, the daughter of one of his subcontractors. Each affair followed the same pattern: expensive gifts, secret trips, promises of a future that never materialized, and then, eventually, a payoff, hush money disguised as a consulting fee or a severance package. But Katie was different. Katie was the one he'd chosen to replace me with. The night I found the photos from Turks and Caicos, the ones taken during his supposed conference in Dallas, I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. I just sat at my computer in the dark, looking at pictures of my husband with another woman, and made a decision. I opened a new folder, named it Evidence, and started saving everything. 11 months. That's how long I stayed silent. 11 months of smiling at dinner parties and asking about his day and pretending I didn't know that every word out of his mouth was a lie.
It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than the divorce. Harder than watching him parade Katie around like a trophy. Because every day I had to choose. Choose to keep quiet, choose to keep collecting, choose to wait for the right moment. The right moment came when he served me with divorce papers. His lawyer called it an amicable separation. The terms were insulting. $50,000 and a used car. That was what 7 years of my life was worth to Terry Johnson. I signed anyway. Let him think he'd won. Let him celebrate his victory. Let him get comfortable. Because I knew something he didn't. I knew that the real battle hadn't even started yet. And I had 347 pages of evidence that said I was going to win. Leonard Whitmore's office was on the 50th floor of a building that looked like it was made entirely of glass and ambition. The view from his window showed all of Chicago, spread out like a game board waiting to be played. He was old, 70, maybe older. White hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a suit that cost more than most people's cars. The kind of man who had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. He specialized in corporate fraud. His reputation was legendary. His fees were astronomical. When I first called his office, his secretary told me he wasn't taking new clients. His calendar was booked for the next 18 months. When I mentioned the name Johnson Development Group, there was a long pause. And then she asked if I could come in the following morning. "Mrs. Gibson," he said after reviewing my file for 2 hours, "do you understand what you have here?" "I think so." He shook his head slowly, his eyes still scanning the spreadsheets and bank statements I'd brought. "I don't think you do. This isn't a divorce case anymore. This is criminal fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering. Your ex-husband hasn't just cheated on you. He's cheated the federal government. He's cheated his investors, his partners, and probably a dozen other people we haven't even identified yet." I sat very still. What does that mean? "It means we have options." He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "We can pursue this civilly. Sue for recovery of marital assets, fraudulent conveyance, the whole standard playbook." "You'd probably win, but it would take years, cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees, and he'd find ways to hide what's left before the judgment was even issued. Men like your husband, they're good at making money disappear." Or
Or we bring in the authorities, let the FBI handle it. You cooperate as a witness, provide the evidence, and let the justice system do its job. They have resources we don't have. Subpoena power, the ability to freeze assets before they can be moved, the threat of criminal prosecution, which tends to make people very cooperative very quickly. And what happens to Terry? Mr. Whitmore took off his glasses and polished them with a silk handkerchief. If even half of what's in this file is provable, and based on what I'm seeing, I suspect it's all provable. Federal prison, 10 years minimum, probably more. Wire fraud alone carries up to 20 years per count, and from what you've shown me, there are multiple counts. I thought about that. 10 years, a decade of Terry's life gone. The company he'd built, destroyed. The reputation he'd cultivated, ruined. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd stolen, everything he'd lied about, all of it collapsing around him. Part of me wanted to feel satisfied, vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. "Let me think about it," I said. "Of course," Mr. Whitmore replied. "But don't think too long. Evidence has a way of disappearing when people get desperate. And your husband strikes me as the type who will get very desperate very quickly once he realizes what's happening." 2 days later, I got a call from someone unexpected. Her name was Patty Wellman. She'd been Terry's executive assistant for 12 years. Reliable, discreet, the kind of employee who sees everything and says nothing. Until she was fired. "Mrs. Gibson," she said, her voice nervous over the phone, "I saw the news about your divorce. I wanted to reach out. I think I might have some information you'd want to see." We met at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. Patty was in her 50s with kind eyes and the slightly haunted look of someone who'd seen too much and stayed too long. She brought a flash drive. "I started noticing things about 3 years ago," she said. "Payments that didn't match projects, invoices for services that were never rendered. I asked questions. Mr. Johnson told me to mind my own business. 6 months later, I was let go. Budget cuts, they said." I looked at the flash drive in her hand. "What's on there?" "Emails," she said. "Contracts, bank transfers, everything I could copy before they walked me out the door. I kept it because I didn't know what else to do. And then I saw what's happening with the company, the investors pulling out, the audits. I thought maybe it was time." "Why are you helping me?" Patty looked at me for a long moment. "Because I worked for that man for 12 years. I covered for him, made excuses for him, cleaned up his messes, and in the end, he threw me away like I was nothing." She paused. "You seem like a good person, Mrs. Gibson. I don't think you deserved what he did to you." I took the flash drive. "Thank you." Patty nodded. "Be careful. He's not as smart as he thinks he is, but he's dangerous when he's cornered." I remembered those words later. I should have remembered them sooner. With Patty's files added to my own, the case against Terry was overwhelming. Mr. Whitmore called it one of the most comprehensive fraud packages he'd ever seen. "We're ready," he told me. "The question is, are you?" I thought about Terry, about the man I'd married and the monster he'd become, about the years I'd wasted and the lies I'd believed, about Katie and the women before her and the women who would probably come after. "I'm ready," I said. Mr. Whitmore picked up the phone and called a number. He spoke for a few minutes, then hung up and looked at me. "Agent Marlene Castillo," he said. "FBI Financial Crimes Unit. She'll be in touch within the week." "What happens now?" "Now," he said, "we set the trap, and we wait for your ex-husband to walk right into it." 3 months after the divorce, Terry's lawyer called with a settlement offer. $800,000, paid over 5 years. In exchange, I would sign a non-disclosure agreement and agree to never discuss the marriage or its dissolution publicly. It was an insult, a fraction of what I was owed, a bribe to keep me quiet. I accepted, not because I wanted the money, not because I was giving up. I accepted because I needed time. The FBI investigation was moving forward, but these things take months, sometimes years. I needed Terry to believe he had won. I needed him to relax. My lawyer drew up the paperwork. We set the signing date for 90 days out. Plenty of time for Terry to get comfortable. Plenty of time for me to finish what I'd started. Those 90 days were fascinating to watch. Terry went public with Katie, not just public, aggressively, ostentatiously public. Instagram posts every day, magazine interviews where he talked about finding true love after a difficult marriage, a spread in Chicago Social about the hot developer and his gorgeous girlfriend photographed in what they called their lakeside estate, my grandmother's house, our garden, the Japanese maple I'd planted the first year of our marriage. They were photographed at restaurants and galas and Cubs games. They were the picture of success. Terry had never been this visible during our marriage. He'd always been private, protective of his image, careful about what he shared. Now he was everywhere, as if he was trying to prove something, as if he needed the whole world to see how happy he was. Katie was worse. She posted everything, their breakfasts, their dinners, their vacations, the view from their bedroom window, which was actually the view from my bedroom window. She started a home decor account where she documented her plans to renovate the house, describing it as updating this gorgeous old place we just acquired. Just acquired, as if it was something Terry had bought for her, not something I'd inherited from a grandmother who died before I ever met him. She called it her new project. She talked about renovations and interior designers and how she was going to make it her own. She wanted to tear out my grandmother's rose garden and put in a pool. She wanted to paint the dining room, the one with the original crown molding, a color she called millennial gray. She wanted to rip out the built-in bookshelves in the study, the ones my grandfather had made by hand, and install a walk-in closet. I watched all of it from a distance, through social media and mutual acquaintances and the occasional Google alert I'd set up on their names. I didn't react. I didn't comment. I just watched and waited. Some nights, I'd lie in bed and think about that house, about the memories embedded in its walls, about Christmas mornings and summer afternoons and the sound of my grandmother's voice in the kitchen. I'd think about Katie ripping it all apart, erasing everything that had made it special, and I'd feel something hot and sharp in my chest. But then I'd remember the plan, the evidence, the trap that was slowly closing around Terry with every passing day. And I'd breathe, and I'd wait. Meanwhile, the FBI was building their case. Agent Castillo was thorough. She interviewed former employees, she subpoenaed bank records, she traced the money through shell companies and offshore accounts. Every week, she called me with updates. Every week, the noose tightened. Terry had no idea. He was too busy enjoying his victory, too busy spending money he thought was his, too busy believing that he'd gotten away with everything. The investors were the first crack in the facade. Glenn Harrington pulled out of 3 major projects. Other backers followed. The audits revealed irregularities that couldn't be explained. Banks started asking questions about collateral and cash flow. Johnson Development was bleeding, but Terry kept smiling for the cameras, kept posting about his blessed life, kept pretending everything was fine. The day before the settlement signing, Terry posted a photo from Napa Valley. He and Katie at a vineyard, glasses of wine raised in a toast. The caption read, "Living my best life, new beginnings, #blessed." That same day, Agent Castillo called me. "The grand jury approved the indictment," she said. "We're ready to move." "When?"
Soon. But there's something else you should know. What? We've been monitoring your ex-husband's communications. He's hired someone, a fixer, a man named Nolan Birch. We believe he's planning to fabricate evidence against you. I felt my stomach drop. What kind of evidence? Financial fraud, money laundering. He wants to make it look like you were the one stealing from the company, like you were the criminal all along. Can he do that? He can try. Agent Castillo's voice was calm. But here's the thing, Mrs. Gibson. Nolan Birch has been under federal investigation for 18 months. He's been cooperating with us in exchange for leniency on his own charges. Everything your ex-husband tells him, everything he asks him to do, we're recording all of it. I closed my eyes. So this is a trap within a trap? Exactly. We just need you to play along a little longer. Can you do that? I thought about Terry, about his smug smile and his confident walk and his absolute certainty that he was smarter than everyone else. Yes, I said, I can do that. What I didn't know was just how far Terry would go. What I didn't know was that the next 3 weeks would be the hardest of my life. What I didn't know was that before this was over, I would be the most hated woman in Chicago, and I would have to watch it happen and wait and trust that the truth would eventually come out. It started with a photo. Not a glamorous photo, not a magazine spread. A mugshot. My face, tired and confused, staring into a camera in what looked like a police station. The photo was real. It had been taken 6 weeks earlier, when I'd gone to the FBI field office to provide additional testimony, standard procedure. They photograph everyone who enters certain areas, security protocol, nothing more. But out of context, stripped of explanation, it looked like something else entirely. It looked like an arrest.
Terry posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Justice is coming. The truth about my ex-wife is finally being revealed. Stay tuned. #truth will out. #justice for Terry." The story that accompanied it was elaborate. According to Terry, I was the mastermind behind the financial irregularities at Johnson Development. I had been skimming money for years. I had set up the shell companies. I had forged his signature on documents. I had framed him to cover my own crimes. The divorce was my attempt to escape before the walls closed in. Everything he'd done, every lie he'd told, every dollar he'd stolen, it was actually all my fault. None of it was true. Every single word was a lie. But lies spread faster than truth. That's the nature of the internet. People don't want facts. They want stories. They want villains and heroes and dramatic reversals. And Terry was giving them exactly what they wanted. Within 24 hours, the post had 2 million views. Within 48 hours, it was a national story. Websites picked it up, news channels mentioned it, social media exploded with opinions from people who had never met either of us, but were absolutely certain they knew who was lying. The hashtag Justice for Terry started trending. Influencers I'd never heard of were making videos about the case. True crime podcasts were discussing the scandal. Anonymous accounts were spreading screenshots of documents that looked official but were completely fabricated. It was a coordinated campaign, professional and relentless, designed to destroy my reputation before I could destroy his. The comments were brutal. Gold digger, thief, criminal, liar, snake, homewrecker in reverse. People I'd never met were calling for my arrest. Strangers were sending me death threats. Old acquaintances, people who had smiled at my dinner table and drank my wine, were unfollowing me, blocking me, erasing me from their lives as if I'd never existed. Katie added her own fuel to the fire. She posted tearful videos about how she'd been victimized by my schemes, how she trusted Terry only to discover his ex-wife had been stealing from him all along. She called me a monster, a predator, a woman who destroyed everyone she touched, a manipulative narcissist who was finally getting what she deserved. She did an interview with the gossip blogger where she cried about the trauma of discovering that the woman who had seemed so nice at the divorce proceedings was actually a criminal mastermind. She talked about how scared she was, how she couldn't sleep at night knowing what I was capable of, how Terry was the real victim in all of this. The video got 7 million views. For 3 days, I was the most hated woman in Chicago, maybe the most hated woman in America. I couldn't leave my house. Reporters camped outside on the sidewalk waiting for me to emerge so they could shout questions and shove microphones in my face. Photographers with long lenses tried to catch me through the windows. My phone rang constantly with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. When I stopped answering, they started leaving voicemails. Some were threatening, some were obscene, some were just people calling to tell me I deserved to suffer. My mother called, crying, asking what was happening. I told her it would be okay. I told her to stop watching the news. I told her I couldn't explain everything right now, but that the truth would come out soon. I'm not sure she believed me. I'm not sure I believed myself. The grocery store where I'd shopped for years asked me not to come back. Other customers were uncomfortable, they said, creating a scene. I ordered delivery after that, but even the delivery drivers looked at me with suspicion. One of them asked if I was the woman from the internet. I didn't answer. I just took my groceries and closed the door. Old friends stopped calling. Colleagues from my previous job sent carefully worded emails expressing hope that everything would work out while making it clear they couldn't be publicly associated with me. The one friend who did reach out, a woman named Sandra, who I'd known since college, was told by her husband that it would be better for his career if she kept her distance. She called to apologize. I understood. I did understand. That was the worst part.
On the third night, I sat alone in my living room in the dark, the same living room where I'd spent 7 years of my marriage, the same living room where I'd pretended to be happy while my husband betrayed me in every possible way. The windows were closed, the curtains were drawn. Outside, I could hear the occasional click of a camera or the murmur of reporters talking to each other.
Inside, there was only silence and the glow of my phone screen showing notification after notification of people hating me. I thought about giving up, about running, about disappearing and starting over somewhere no one knew my name. I could sell the house, change my identity, move to some small town in another state. I could become someone else, leave Brenda Gibson behind and become whoever I wanted to be. But then I remembered what Agent Castillo had told me. Everything he tells Nolan Birch, we're recording. So I waited. I stayed silent. I let the hatred wash over me like a wave, knowing that the tide would eventually turn, knowing that somewhere in a federal office building, people were listening to recordings that would change everything. On the fourth day, it did. The press conference was held at the FBI field office downtown. Agent Castillo stood at a podium flanked by federal prosecutors. Behind her, a screen displayed photographs and documents. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we are here today to announce the indictment of Terrence Michael Johnson on charges of wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, and obstruction of justice." The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Agent Castillo waited for silence before continuing. "Additionally, we have evidence that Mr. Johnson, in an attempt to evade prosecution, engaged in a deliberate campaign to fabricate evidence against his former wife, Mrs. Brenda Gibson. This campaign included the creation of false documents, the coordination of a social media disinformation effort, and conspiracy to commit perjury." She pressed a button and the screen behind her lit up with an audio waveform. The following recording was made with the cooperation of federal investigators. Terry's voice filled the room, clear, unmistakable. "I don't care if it's true. Make it look real. She needs to be destroyed before she destroys me. If we have to create documents, create them. I'll pay whatever it takes." The recording continued. Terry giving instructions to Nolan Birch, Terry discussing how to plant evidence, Terry admitting that Katie could become a liability and suggesting she could be made the mastermind too if necessary. That last part made the reporters gasp. I imagine Katie somewhere watching this unfold, realizing that the man she trusted had been prepared to sacrifice her too. Agent Castillo turned off the recording. "Mrs. Gibson is not a suspect. She is a cooperating witness whose courage and patience made this investigation possible. The campaign against her was criminal and calculated, and those responsible will be held accountable." I wasn't at the press conference. I watched it from my living room, surrounded by the same silence that had felt so oppressive just hours before. But now the silence felt different. It felt like vindication. The internet turned on a dime. It's funny how that works. The same people who had been calling for my head 3 days ago were suddenly apologizing. The same influencers who had made videos about what a terrible person I was were now making videos about how they'd been manipulated, how they'd fallen for a coordinated disinformation campaign, how they should have waited for all of the facts before passing judgment. The hashtag changed. Hashtag Justice for Brenda started trending. Within hours, it had more engagement than hashtag Justice for Terry had ever achieved. Compilations appeared everywhere, screenshots of Terry's confident posts next to his recorded admissions, side-by-side comparisons of Katie's tearful videos, and the federal indictment naming her as an accessory. Timelines showing how the disinformation campaign had been coordinated, with experts analyzing the patterns of fake accounts and bot activity that had amplified the lies. The same gossip blogger who had interviewed Katie posted a new video titled, "I was wrong. I'm sorry." She cried again, but this time the tears were different. This time she was apologizing to me. The video got 15 million views. Terry became a meme. The man who tried to frame his ex-wife, the developer who destroyed himself. There were compilations of his most arrogant Instagram posts set to ironic music. There were dramatic readings of his recorded conversations with Nolan Birch. Someone made a parody account called
Terry Johnson's Prison Tips. It had 400,000 followers within a week. Katie deleted all her social media, but not fast enough. Everything had been archived. Every post, every video, every comment she'd made about me. The internet doesn't let you disappear. The internet remembers everything. I got messages too, thousands of them, people apologizing for what they'd said about me, people sharing their own stories of being falsely accused. I didn't respond to most of them. What would I say? I understood the impulse to apologize, but I also knew that most of these people will do the exact same thing the next time a compelling story came along with a villain who was easy to hate. That's just how people are. I didn't hold it against them, but I didn't forgive them either. The arrest happened that same evening. Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse. The irony of the name wasn't lost on me. It was a Saturday night, and the restaurant was packed with Chicago's elite. The same people who had attended Terry's charity galas. The same people who had whispered about me at the Porsche dealership. The same people who had watched my reputation be shredded online. Terry and Katie were at a corner table, celebrating. They didn't know yet. They hadn't seen the press conference. They thought they'd won. I was there too, a different table, in the back, alone with a glass of wine, watching. Agent Castillo entered first, 2 other agents behind her. They walked through the restaurant with the calm efficiency of people who'd done this many times before. Terry saw them coming. I watched his face change, confusion first, then recognition, then finally, fear. He tried to run. Where did he think he was going? The agents caught him before he'd taken 3 steps. Diners were standing up, pulling out phones, recording everything. Katie tried to distance herself. She actually pushed her chair back and said loudly, "I had nothing to do with any of this." One of the agents stopped her. "Ma'am, you're also wanted for questioning regarding your involvement in Devane Consulting LLC. Her face went white. Terry saw me then. Across the restaurant, through the chaos, his eyes found mine. For a moment, everything else disappeared. It was just the 2 of us, the man I'd married and the woman I'd become. "This is your fault," he shouted. "You did this to me." I didn't respond. I just raised my wine glass, a small toast, a quiet acknowledgement that it was finally over. The agents led him toward the door. He was still shouting, still blaming me, still convinced that none of this was his fault. The restaurant was silent, except for the clicking of phone cameras. Every person in that room was recording. Every moment was being captured for posterity. I finished my wine, left cash on the table, and walked out into the Chicago night. The air was cold, the stars were hidden by city lights, but for the first time in years I could breathe. The trial took 14 months, 14 months of testimony and evidence and legal maneuvering, 14 months of watching Terry's empire crumble brick by brick. The verdict came on a Tuesday afternoon. Guilty on all counts: wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit perjury. The sentence: 14 years in federal prison. I wasn't in the courtroom when it happened. I'd given my testimony months earlier. I'd provided my evidence. I'd done everything the law required of me. When the moment of judgment came, I was at home, in my garden, planting new roses. Mr. Whitmore called to tell me. His voice was quiet, satisfied. "It's done," he said. "He'll be transferred to a federal facility in Minnesota by the end of the month." I thanked him, hung up, went back to my roses. People expected me to celebrate, to throw a party, give interviews, write a book. They expected to gloat. I didn't feel like gloating. I felt like planting roses. Johnson Development Group filed for bankruptcy 6 weeks after the verdict. The projects were abandoned. The investors sued. The employees scattered to other firms, other cities, other lives. The house in Naperville, my grandmother's house, was never touched. It had always been mine. It would always be mine. Terry never lived there again after the night of his arrest. Katie's story was shorter. She pleaded guilty to tax fraud related to Devane Consulting, 18 months in a minimum security facility, restitution of $340,000. The apartment in Miami was seized. The jewelry was auctioned. By the time she got out, there would be nothing left of the life she'd tried to steal. Her last Instagram post, before she deleted everything, was a single broken heart emoji. No caption, no hashtags, no comments. I think about Terry sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. I wonder if he understands yet, if he's had time to reflect on the choices that led him to a cell in Minnesota. Probably not.
Men like Terry rarely learn. They spend their lives blaming others, convinced that the world conspired against them, never realizing that they built their own prisons long before the judge handed down the sentence. I sold my stake in Rapid Root last year, used the money to start a foundation, financial literacy for women leaving difficult marriages, legal resources, career counseling, the kind of support I wished I'd had when I first started suspecting that my husband was not the man I thought he was. I called it the Gibson Foundation, not after me, after my grandmother, the woman who had the foresight to protect what she gave me. Some days I receive letters, women who saw my story online, women who recognized pieces of their own lives in mine, women who are still in the middle of their own battles, looking for proof that it's possible to come out the other side. I write back when I can. I tell them what I've learned. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Find good lawyers, and never ever let anyone convince you that you're worth less than you are. This morning, I woke up early, made coffee, sat on my porch and watched the sun come up over Naperville. The garden is blooming. The Japanese maple is starting to turn. Another fall is coming, another season of change. My phone buzzed. A notification from Instagram. Someone had tagged me in a post. I opened it, curious. It was a screenshot of an old article, a photo of Terry and Katie at some gala, champagne glasses raised, looking like they owned the world. The caption read, "Throwback to when this guy thought he was untouchable. How's federal prison, Terry?" I smiled, put down my phone, went back to watching the sunrise. Revenge isn't what I thought it would be. It's not triumphant. It's not satisfying in the way movies make it seem. It's quieter than that, smaller. It's the freedom to drink your coffee in peace, the knowledge that you did everything right even when everyone else was doing everything wrong. Terry asked me once, at the very beginning, what I was going to do without him, as if I couldn't exist on my own, as if I was nothing without his name, his money, his approval. I never answered him. But if I could go back, if I could stand in that courthouse one more time, I know exactly what I'd say. I'm going to live, Terry. I'm going to wake up every morning in my grandmother's house in the life I built for myself, and I'm going to be at peace. I'm going to plant roses and drink coffee and watch the seasons change. I'm going to help other women find the strength I had to find alone. And you're going to spend the next 14 years wondering how you lost everything, how the woman you underestimated turned out to be the one who brought you down. That's what I'm going to do, Terry. That's what I've been doing all along. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Don't forget to subscribe and rate my story from 0 to 10. Until next time.